Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you, featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today, my guest is Michael Kerry. Now, he was born in Brooklyn, New York, and he's second-generation American and raised in an Orthodox Jewish home. And, man, if you hear the schools he went to and the things that he did and does, you're going to say, whoa. Let me hear a little bit about this. So let me just say, he went to Brooklyn Tech, which is a New York school, and also New York Tech, which is another school, and Indiana Tech, which is another school, and the Air Force Cryptographic School. He's certified as a fire suppression engineer, certified as an electric contractor, and certified as a building contractor, and also as a private pilot of all things, and then certified again as an open water scuba diver, which really, just when I hear about all this, I get totally exhausted. But the reality is that he's done so many wonderful things that he's going to share it with you, and I think you're going to find it very interesting. So welcome to my show, Michael Kerry.
Thank you, Susan. Very nice speaking with you.
Michael, there are so many stories that I'm sure that you've had over the course of your lifetime so far because of all the things that you've been involved in. So there must be a story that you find or you think our audience will find quite fascinating. So, just give us a kind of a taste of what your life has been like and one of the situations that made you feel great.
Well, I would say that my greatest adventure in my life that I did voluntarily was my treasure diving expedition. When I was living in the Florida Keys in my retirement years, one of my neighbors was very involved with the treasure diving community, and he and I had a discussion about us putting together some money and launch our own expedition. So in the summer of 1995, using my 45-foot boat, we went to Suppression Inlet, where there had been treasure found previously, and began looking for sunken gold. And during that summer, we found in very shallow water, 12 to 15 feet, we found artifacts, we found gold, we found silver. It was a very exciting 100 days diving with other dedicated divers who were working for me, sharks, lots of stuff going on.
Wow.
Probably the most memorable summer of my life.
It sounds like it. Boy, would I have loved to have been with you on that. I have to let you know, I was down in the Keys several years ago, and we went into the Mel Fisher Museum where they had bars of gold all over the place. It was such an exciting thing to see, and it was almost like the gold rush. You felt like you were in a place where you could possibly get gold too, and you did. That's interesting. You weren't acquainted with Mel Fisher, were you?
Yes, I was. And actually, Mel Fisher, who is now passed away, had what's called an admiralty lease on all of the coastline of Florida. And so I worked on a subcontract with Mel Fisher on this expedition in Suppression Inlet. And in my contract, the state of Florida was able to take 20% of whatever I found, and then the remaining 80%, Mel and I divided equally.
Wow. I don't want to ask you how much money that's worth, but it must have been worth a fortune.
Well, it was worth a great deal of money, but it cost a great deal of money to do this expedition, and it actually turned out financially as a break-even, but the experience was worth many millions of dollars.
Isn't that interesting? Well, let's move on a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about your stint in the Air Force during the war and what that was like, and how did you get involved in something like that? Weren't you frightened?
I think the reason that the military likes to recruit young people is that we feel invulnerable and that nothing is going to happen to us. And that's how I felt. I joined the Air Force because it seemed like the best way to get out of Brooklyn, to start from nothing, which is what I had, was nothing, and see how I could advance myself in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. The military gives people a lot of opportunities. I've spoken to literally dozens of young men in the military and women as well. And one of the great advantages of being in the military is that you can study so many different things, and they give you the opportunity to do so. And a lot of people join because it's really fantastic if you want to get a certain education in a certain particular subject or a skill set. It gives you that chance, and people become doctors as a result. They go to in the military, and then they go to medical school or something like that. So military has a lot of advantages. On the other hand, then you're faced with a lot of fear and war and fighting and risking your life. Did you feel at any point that you were risking your life?
No, I never did. When I was in the Air Force, because my math skills were very high, they recruited me into the cryptographic school. And after that, I was sent all over the world and in really what became 3 war zones. But I never felt that I was going to be killed or injured. I did my job. I worked with my coworkers, and it was the furthest thing from my mind. Did I know it could happen? Yes, absolutely.
Right.
But you do your job, and that's your focus. And the dangers that might surround you, you just push it into the background.
Now, you mentioned cryptographic. What does that mean?
Cryptographics is the art of encoding and decoding enemy communications.
Wow.
And again, because I had very good math skills, they recruited me into doing this. And it was an interesting recruitment process, but I just seemed to have had a talent of coming up with the right answer more often than not. And so we were, of course, looking for Russian encoded messages and keeping American coded messages safe from enemy hands.
That's a fascinating thing. I'm interested in understanding the fact that we have, so much now available to us in the electronic world, in the digital world, where you can find out so many different things and, kind of get yourself involved. Now, is cryptographic, I'm going to call it cryptographics, is that the most modern thing, or has it changed at all so that we are able to know what our enemies are doing?
Well, the name remains the same. The technology is enormously different. When I was in cryptographics, the computers that we used were the size of a large kitchen refrigerator. It's now been incorporated into cell phones, so it's gotten greatly miniaturized. But the algorithms that are in use are designed to prevent the enemy from getting any kind of intel in a reasonable amount of time.
Right.
And by that I mean that highly classified information during wartime has a very limited lifespan. So,
Right.
for example, 30 days. And even if the enemy can break your codes, and if it takes them longer than 30 days, the information is already obsolete.
Interesting. You know, many years ago, when Clinton was in the office and Janet Reno was his right-hand man in many ways, when they left the office, Janet Reno said, you know, people asked her, a lot of the news people said to her, so, Miss Reno, what are you going to do in the future? Even though at that point she had Parkinson's disease and she was unfortunately not feeling well. But the point is that she said, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the computer is protected. Protection is one of the most important things because today anybody can get on the computer, we're talking about young kids even, and they can sabotage what's there. And she said, this is the most important thing in the world because think about it for a minute, Michael. You know, you can literally paralyze the world. So what's your opinion about that?
Well, the biggest problem in electronic security of communications is the human factor. That the reason that the enemy, and by that I don't just mean foreign countries, but hackers, the reason that they're generally able to access information is that somebody left the door open. And by that I mean that people buy electronic devices and don't ever bother putting in a good security code either for their Wi-Fi or their Alexa or their computers. And the same is true in the military. What happens is that there's always somebody who is careless. And they may take a computer home that has classified information on it. They may not properly secure their equipment. They may leave it unsecure. And what happens is that there are constantly computers scanning the internet looking for just this kind of thing.
Wow. So
and
cyberterrorism is a real thing, and it's a really dangerous thing, correct?
Yes, it is. And most Americans tend to think of terrorists as some crazy person with a bomb or a weapon. But some of the terrorists and their organizations are extremely sophisticated. And their job is not to go out and kill people. Their job is to do exactly what we're talking about, that
Right.
They will scan the internet, look for weaknesses. They will look for how to bring down the electrical grid. They will look how to enter military sites. And there are tens of thousands of possibilities and people involved who genuinely want to keep their information secure, but don't bother locking the door, shall we say.
Yeah. Now, if you had a chance, and, you know, this is just a conversation that we're having right now because, I mean, I'm going to ask you a very general question, but a question which probably means a lot and people will, you know, kind of want to know a little bit about this. And that is, if you had an opportunity now to enter the military again or to get involved in politics or something of that nature, how would you change all these dangers that we're facing? You know, that's, as I said, a very broad question. But I'm just curious how you see things, and you know, if again you're kind of an inventor, if you will, and you're also a person who takes a lot of risks. So I'm interested in knowing how you would make our world safer.
Well, on the level of electronic security, I think the biggest problem is that the FBI is no longer the sole entity that gives people security clearances. We now have private agencies. We've got what they call NGOs, non-government organizations, There are just too many people who are granting security clearances to folks who should not have them. And they don't emphasize the penalties involved. When I received my top secret clearance, it was made very clear to me that I would serve 20 years in Leavenworth prison should I violate the oaths that I took.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. Very interesting. So they would send you to prison. Yeah. Well, there are people, there's got to be a reason why people get involved in these things, and I have a suspicion that it's called money. You know, there's tons and tons of illegal money passing through all of the countries, and, you know, people laundering money because they have the opportunity to do so. And, of course, you know, that seems to be the reason that they do all these horrible things in many cases. But let's move on for a moment, and let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurship. You are involved in a business today that, as you explained to me before the show, you said, you know what, I'm so surprised that, you know, what I'm doing has such a large impact on my situation now. So tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurship.
Well, what I found is that many people in let's say, contracting are maybe very knowledgeable about what they do. They may be carpenters, painters, electricians, all of the people involved in construction. But for whatever reason, whether it's a language barrier, an educational barrier, or lack of motivation or fear of failure, do not get themselves properly licensed and insured. And so what I found by getting myself properly licensed and insured as an electrical contractor and as a building contractor, that I can hire as workers who may be extremely qualified to do their job from a technical point of view. Like I have one fellow is an unbelievably good painter, but does not have either the language abilities or other abilities to find work for himself. So whether it's he or a carpenter or other folks, by being a licensed contractor, while they're working under my supervision, they're able to do what they're very good at and earn good livings for themselves while earning good money for myself.
Mm-hmm. Now, so what you're suggesting is that there are opportunities out there for people who certainly don't have the ability necessarily to be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, and there are jobs available. Now, are women involved in this as well? Do you have any women who are looking for jobs such as the ones that you have available?
Yes, absolutely. Right now, there's a shortage. I've been trying to find good roofing people, good painting people. I have 2 jobs that are on hold while I'm trying to get a good carpenter. So there's lots of opportunities, and these are not gender specific. That if you don't have the skills, there are vocational schools available to folks. I learned when I was very young that if you want to get ahead in the world, the biggest obstacle is yourself. You have to get out there and try. And trying and failing is better than not trying.
Yeah. You know, one of my guests originally said to me, they said, you know, I was very inspired by my father, he said, because he knew how to make lemons into lemonade. And that sounds like what you're doing. You're making lemons, which are these, you know, kind of unskilled, or maybe they are skilled jobs, and you're making it into lemonade for people. So when you hear people come out and they say, there are no jobs, I don't know what to do, I'm forced to take on some money from the government, have the government, and, they feel entitled. I guess that's what I'm leading to. And you're telling us the opposite. You're saying that there are things available for people, and I think that's very important that they hear it from you again. I want to know.
Well, are shortchanging themselves that I've never had a job other than my time in the military. I've always gone out and created my own opportunities. That all you have to do is look around and see a need. And I'll tell you a little story. In 1987, there was a substantial correction in the stock market.
Right.
And I had a friend who was a stockbroker and lost his job, and no chance of getting a new job because so many of them lost their job. And I was having lunch with him, and I said, so what? That surely there are neighbors who need their grass mowed. Surely there are folks who need their pools cleaned. There are so many things that you can do to earn a living for yourself. You don't need that job. And he started up a pool service, and I haven't seen him in a couple of years, but he was doing very, very well.
Perfect.
And the point is, you don't need someone to offer a job to you. Go out and make an opportunity for yourself.
Well, those are words of wisdom, and this is a great opportunity to say what an interesting person you are, and your advice to people is really perfect, and I really enjoyed having you as a guest on my show. So I want to say thank you to Michael Kerry, who has just a gamut of things that he's done, and he has shown us that there are, really, he's an inspiration. That's how I'll say it, totally. So thank you so much, Michael Kerry, for being on the Susan Brender Show, and let's do it again.
Thank you, Susan. It was lovely speaking with you, and I'm always at your disposal.
Back in my day, to become an author, you had to master your craft. You needed a team that you could trust, a team that would never flinch in battle. Back in my day, you would risk losing your rights and pay outrageous amounts for terrible service. Well, yesterday is not today. Gladiator Publishing Company has a century-long reputation for defending writers and readers and winning awards for their record-setting low-cost services and market sales. They are 75 to 80% more cost-effective and never touch your royalties or copyrights. Go with a publisher that is so transparent that they have their contract on their webpage. Have your book treated with honesty, loyalty, and respect, period. Visit us at gladiatorpublishing.com or text us at 417-291-9162.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.